As he lowers the lantern into the damp cellar, he feels a cold shiver crawl up his spine because the Apache spy he has been hiding for days suddenly pulls in a sharp breath and whispers that they have found them, forcing him to turn toward the narrow stairs with dread tightening his chest. And in that moment, the weak glow of the lantern reveals the fear in the spy's eyes, fear that carries stories of battles, losses, and a fate neither of them can escape. And when the rancher finally gathers the courage to look beyond the cellar door, he notices faint flashes bursting across the distant mountain tops like silent warnings painted in light, each one brighter than the last. And he realizes with a sinking heart that their secret is no longer safe, and everything he tried to protect is now slipping through his trembling hands. Now he is just a quiet rancher living miles from the nearest town, a man who begins each day before sunrise and ends it with nothing but the sound of wind moving across the empty fields. And for years his life has stayed simple, predictable, untouched by danger, until the night he finds a wounded Apache spy collapsed near the edge of his land, bleeding, exhausted, and gripping a message he refuses to let go. And although every warning in his mind tells him to walk away, something deeper pushes him to lift the stranger into his arms and hide him inside the dark cellar beneath his home, unaware that this single act of mercy will drag him into a world he has never known, a world filled with danger shadowing every step, loyalty that tests the strength of his heart, and betrayal waiting in places he never imagined, turning his quiet existence into a battle he never asked to fight. He carries the spy into the cold, dusty cellar, and after lowering him gently onto an old blanket, he feels the weight of the night closing around his shoulders as if the darkness itself is warning him that nothing in his life will ever be the same again. Yet he forces himself to stay calm because the wounded man is breathing with difficulty and needs help more than he needs fear. So the rancher brings water, bread, and a small lantern whose weak light flickers across the spy's tired face, revealing a strength that survives even through pain. And as the spy eats in silence, the rancher senses that this stranger has walked through storms he himself could never imagine, storms filled with loss, betrayal, and the kind of choices that leave deep scars. And although the rancher has no desire to become part of any conflict, he cannot bring himself to abandon someone fighting to stay alive. And when the spy finally whispers that he needs only time to heal, the rancher nods with a hesitant trust, knowing very well that the danger now lives under his own roof. So each night, he checks the cellar, listening for any sound that might reveal trouble outside, while the spy's strength slowly returns, his eyes observing everything, measuring the world around him, as if every shadow carries meaning and every small sound might hide an enemy. And as days pass, the rancher finds himself wondering who might be searching for this man, what secrets he carries, and what kind of storm is moving quietly toward them. Yet he says nothing because words feel too fragile to carry the truth that has settled between them. And though neither speaks openly, a strange connection forms, built not from trust or friendship, but from the thin line between survival and fate. And one evening, while the wind howls across the plains like a warning too old to ignore, the spy asks in a low voice why the rancher chose to save him. But the rancher has no real answer, because even he cannot explain why. He risked everything for a stranger marked by danger. So he simply says that leaving a wounded man to die would have broken something inside him, something he has spent his whole life trying to protect. And the spy listens with quiet understanding, recognizing that the rancher's world, though peaceful, carries its own kind of loneliness, a silence that hides unspoken wounds. And as the lantern light flickers across the cellar walls, the rancher notices the spy gripping the message he arrived with, holding it like a piece of his own soul. And before he can ask anything, the spy turns his face away, signaling that some truths must remain unspoken for now. And the rancher accepts this with a heavy heart. He rises before dawn as he always has, but now every sound on the wind makes him pause because he knows the world beyond his quiet ranch is shifting in ways he cannot fully understand. And when he rides into town for supplies, he notices tense faces, lowered voices, and travelers whispering about Apache scouts seen moving through the distant hills, their presence stirring fear across the valley. And while he pretends to remain calm, each rumor cuts deeper, especially when he hears that soldiers have begun searching homes without warning, looking for a hidden spy they believe is somewhere near. And as he listens, a slow, heavy dread settles inside him because he realizes these men are not searching randomly. They are following a trail, and sooner or later that trail will lead them to his own land, where a wounded stranger lies recovering in the cellar beneath his feet. And although he tells himself he acted with mercy, the thought of soldiers questioning his loyalty twists his stomach, for he knows they would never accept his reasons, nor understand the quiet bond that has formed between him and the spy, a bond built through silence and shared danger. And when he rides back home with the sky dimming behind the mountains, he notices dust rising from a distant ridge, as if someone has been watching the ranch from above, a detail so small most men would ignore it. But he cannot. Not now. Not with everything at stake. So he urges his horse forward, feeling the weight of unseen eyes following him across the barren land. And by the time he reaches the barn, the sun has nearly vanished, painting the sky with deep red light that seems to warn him that darkness is coming faster than he can prepare for. So he hurries to the cellar, opening the door with a quiet breath, finding the spy awake, sitting against the wall with a steady gaze that seems to pierce straight through every fear he has been trying to hide. And when he tells the spy about the rumors spreading through the valley, the man listens without flinching, as though none of it surprises him, then says that scouts on the hills mean signals will soon follow, signals that mark the beginning of something he refuses to explain. And the rancher feels frustration mixed with fear because he wants answers. Yet he senses that forcing the truth might break whatever fragile trust stands between them. So he simply sits there in the dim glow of the lantern, the silence between them heavier than any words they could share. And as the night deepens, he hears distant echoes drifting across the plains, sounds he cannot place, sharp and rhythmic, like coded warnings traveling through the cold air. And in that moment, he finally admits to himself that his life is no longer his own, because by choosing to save a man marked by danger, he has stepped into a conflict far larger, far darker, and far closer than he ever imagined, a conflict now tightening its hold around him with every passing hour. Unaware that every passing moment is pulling them closer to a night when shadows will move across the mountains, signals will flash in patterns that only the spy can read, and the world he once knew will collapse under the weight of secrets he never meant to carry. He sits in the lantern's dim glow, still shaken by the distant echoes drifting across the plains, and as the night deepens, the spy finally breaks the long silence by speaking about the world he comes from, his voice low yet steady, describing wide deserts where his people once lived freely before broken promises scattered families and turned home into battlegrounds. And the rancher listens without moving, realizing that the man before him carries pain carved deep into his spirit, pain far older than the wounds that brought him here. So he shifts closer, trying to understand the truth behind each quiet word. And the spy continues, telling him about a family he may never see again, a brother lost in a raid, a mother who prayed for peace until her last breath, and a homeland that feels smaller with every passing year. And although the rancher has always lived far from trouble, something inside him stirs as he hears these stories, something that whispers that suffering does not belong to one land or one people. And he begins to see the spy not as a symbol of danger, but as a man walking a lonely road shaped by choices forced upon him. And while the lantern flickers against the rough walls, the connection between them strengthens, silent yet powerful, built through shared nights and whispered truths. And the rancher finds himself speaking too, admitting things he never told anyone, like how loneliness settled in his house long before the spy arrived, how the quiet nights once felt peaceful but now feel hollow, as though his life had been waiting for something to push him into motion. And the spy listens with a calm expression that reveals understanding without judgment, and the rancher feels an unexpected sense of comfort, realizing that two men from distant worlds can find common ground even in a cellar shadowed by danger. And as midnight approaches, the wind rises outside, carrying a strange tension that neither of them ignores. So the rancher asks if the scouts seen on the hills are coming for the spy alone or for something far larger. And the spy hesitates before saying that signals have likely already been sent and decisions made in places neither of them can reach, decisions that could decide who lives and who does not. And the rancher feels his heart tighten, because he knows this man is not only running from soldiers, but also from a conflict that has swallowed entire communities. And he wishes he could offer more than temporary shelter in a cellar, yet he has nothing else to give. So he simply says that the spy can stay as long as he needs. And the spy lowers his head in a silent gesture of gratitude that says more than any speech could. And for a brief moment, the cellar feels less like a hiding place and more like a fragile sanctuary carved out of fear and hope. But that fragile peace breaks when the spy suddenly straightens and says he hears something outside, a pattern in the wind he recognizes instantly. And as the rancher strains to listen, he feels the weight of unseen danger closing in once again, proving that their quiet bond will soon be tested by forces neither of them can escape. He moves toward the sound the spy heard, but before he reaches the cellar steps, a firm hand grips his arm, and the spy whispers that the night has changed, his tone sharp enough to cut through the darkness itself. And without waiting for questions, he urges the rancher outside, where the air feels heavier than before as though the land is holding its breath. And the moment the rancher pushes open the door, his eyes lock on the distant ridges where sudden bursts of white light erupt in silent rhythm, each flash brighter than the last, forming patterns across the mountains he has known his entire life. Patterns he has never seen before, patterns that make his heart pound in his chest with a fear he cannot name. And the spy steps beside him, still weak, but standing with a tension that tells the rancher this is far worse than any rumor whispered in town. And when the spy says those lights mean they are coming, not only for him, but for anyone who stands in their way, the rancher feels cold dread sink into every corner of his mind because he knows the valley is not ready for whatever those signals are calling. And he realizes he is trapped between forces he cannot predict, forces moving on both sides of the hills like shadows preparing to strike. So he asks what the flashes mean, but the spy only shakes his head and says that once the mountaintops speak, the outcome has already been set, leaving the rancher with no answer and no time. And as the lights continue their silent warnings, he senses movement in the fields, faint yet unmistakable, like riders pushing through the darkness without torches, using the signals to guide their approach. And the rancher's breath turns shallow because he suddenly understands that hiding the spy has tied his fate to whatever is unfolding around them, and he cannot outrun it anymore. So he pulls the spy back toward the cellar, not for safety, but for a plan he has not fully formed, a plan born from instinct rather than certainty. Yet the spy stops him and says hiding is no longer possible because those watching from the hills already know where he is. And the rancher feels a tremor of helplessness as he realizes every choice he makes now will mark the path that follows. And the spy looks at him with a calm acceptance that breaks the rancher's heart, as though the man has lived his whole life preparing for this moment. And when another burst of light flashes across the distant ridge, brighter than all the others, the rancher feels something shift in the air, a warning he can almost touch. So he tells the spy they need to move before the valley fills with riders from every direction. But the spy says that moving may draw more attention and staying may trap them both, leaving the rancher torn between courage and fear. Yet something in him refuses to surrender because he knows that if he lets this man fall, he will carry the guilt forever. So he clenches his jaw, steps closer, and vows that no matter who is coming down those mountains, they will not take the spy without facing him first, even if it means standing alone against a storm he never asked to face. He keeps watching the ridges long after the flashes stop, but the silence that follows feels even more threatening. And as the first thin line of dawn touches the sky, he hears distant hoofbeats rolling across the valley like thunder trying to hide under the morning wind, and his chest tightens because he recognizes the sharp rhythm of trained riders, soldiers moving with purpose, drawing closer with every passing second. While on the opposite side of the hills, he notices shifting shadows that travel too smoothly to be animals, figures slipping through the brush with careful steps that confirm the spy was right. Both sides are closing in, and he understands he has reached a point where no choice will keep him safe. So he moves back toward the cellar with urgency pressing against every heartbeat. And when he pushes the heavy door open, the spy is already standing, silent and aware, as though he felt the danger before the rancher even returned. And for a moment they stare at each other, neither needing words because the truth hangs between them heavier than any fear. And the rancher's voice trembles as he says soldiers are riding straight for the ranch. men who will not ask questions, men who will shoot first and sort the pieces later, and the spy nods slowly with an expression that carries both acceptance and sorrow. But the rancher cannot bear the thought of handing him over, because despite all the danger, this man has trusted him in a way no one else ever has. And that trust has carved its place deeper than he expected, so deep that betrayal feels impossible. And the spy quietly tells him he does not have to choose. He can save himself by pretending he never met him. Yet the rancher feels a fierce anger rise inside him at the suggestion, because running from this now would make him a coward, and he refuses to let fear shape his fate. But the pounding hoofbeats grow louder, shaking the dry earth beneath their feet, and he knows they only have moments before soldiers surround the house. So he pulls the spy toward the back exit, a hidden door that leads into a narrow, dry creek bed winding through the land. A path only someone who has lived here his whole life would know. And the spy pauses, realizing the rancher intends to help him escape despite the danger. And he hesitates as though he does not want to become the reason another man dies. But the rancher pushes him forward, insisting there is no turning back now, not when both sides are ready to spill blood. And his heart hammers against his ribs as he hears voices calling orders from the front of the ranch, boots thudding against the wooden porch, rifles being loaded with cold precision. And he glances back once, knowing that if he is caught now, there will be no trial, no mercy, only a rope waiting for him at sunrise. But he still chooses the path he knows is right, even if it destroys everything he has ever known. Because protecting the spy has become more than a choice. It has become a purpose carved by moments that changed him forever. And as they slip into the creek bed with dawn rising behind them, he understands that the storm he feared has finally arrived, and there is no going back to the quiet life he once knew. He moves through the tightening shadows of the canyon with the spy beside him, each step guided not by safety, but by a fragile hope neither dares to speak. And as the rising sun spills gold across the rocks, he feels the weight of everything he has risked pressing against his chest. Yet he does not turn back, because something inside him knows that saving this man is the only choice he could live with. And when they reach a narrow ridge overlooking the valley, the spy stops and looks at him with a silent gratitude that carries the pain of every loss he has endured. And the rancher realizes that their paths may never cross again, but the bond forged in fear and sacrifice will never fade. And as distant riders scatter across the land searching for a trace that no longer exists, he understands that the war outside may continue for years, yet the war within him has finally found its peace, leaving him standing in the morning light, changed forever.